Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, cool. I am on my phone as well as my laptop. So let me, I think we're a little bit delayed. So let me just like get right to it.
We
Thanks.
are 30 minutes delayed, so I'd like to
Yeah,
apologize to
we'll
all our
keep it
customers.
short, right? I mean, again, like what we want to do is like I'm just gonna keep it short so everyone can kind of move on with their day. But I just want to highlight a couple of different. We're going to take a slightly different approach to what is traditionally like more like a I would term it like a marketing kind of thing. We don't really need to talk about IBM Cloud and what we offer on IBM Cloud. It's really simple to just go on to cloud.ibm.com and look at the breadth of services that IBM Cloud has to offer. I mean, we work with a lot of companies in the Philippines to offer, traditional like IBM services that, you would once, know to be behind the firewall, things like Power Virtual Machines, things like IBM I, AIX, AS400, that type of thing. Those services are now available on the cloud. However, we do offer, the next generation of computing, stuff, not just x86, but it really dovetails into what I'm going to talk about today, which is what is the next generation of, hybrid cloud? You guys have heard the term hybrid cloud over the last, I don't know, I want to say like 4 or 5 years kind of thing. And hybrid cloud as what is defined today really just means, okay, you have like one data center, that's on premise, and you're sort of like, leveraging like cloud services from, a cloud provider. But these days, in the customers that we speak to, most of them use a mix of cloud providers. Some will use Microsoft for their, their Office 365. They would use Alibaba because like the computing is cheap. They might use IBM Cloud because like they like the AI capabilities. So the hybrid cloud today is really a combination of many different public clouds as well as some workloads that are deployed on premise. Okay, so my name is Josh. I work for IBM Cloud, obviously, and I am the tech lead. So my presentation today will be really focused on the technology aspects of what IBM will bring to the table. Okay, so here's the agenda. We'll try to keep it to a tight, 30 minutes. But if anyone wants to, get in touch with IBM, I believe you can just call ECS and they'll give you my contact. So we want to touch on a couple of different things that we just spoke about briefly about the hybrid cloud today. But more importantly, what is enabling this notion of, distributed cloud? You know what I mean? So there's a key thing that is currently taking the IT industry, really by storm. But it started out a long time ago. I'm sure everyone here, if you're in the technical field or if you've purchased applications over the last like 1 or 2 years, you probably would have heard about microservices. You would probably have heard about containers, and your application vendor or your outsourced application developer has probably suggested, or your in-house teams have probably recommended that you look at how you package your applications into a container to leverage things like microservices style architecture, that sort of thing, right? Now, if you look at the graph that I have here, we showed this like yesterday. You can see that in the next 5 years or so, containers are going to be the dominant application delivery platform. Okay, so you're gonna be buying application in the form of containers. You're going to be building and deploying applications in the form of containers. Most organizations would pretty much be using things like DevOps, building DevOps pipelines, deploying, containers at scale, because what is currently known as one, big virtual machine, will then be decomposed into many different microservices residing on perhaps several machines. but how do you manage that across like, your infrastructure? Because if you're a single application that you can sort of contain really nicely in a box, it's now, 50 microservices that is shared across, a few different applications. What's going to happen to the management style? So this is where IBM has taken a really strategic approach in how to help customers, take that next step, right? So we bring to the table both like software services to help your teams understand as well as manage containers moving forward. But of course, what we're going to talk about today is some of the tooling that we have in place for what's known as the distributed cloud. The observability aspect of it comes from the ability to, if you're managing a distributed kind of architecture, you really would want to figure out which microservice works the best, which you have to scale, which you have to monitor, which has failed, what kind of health checks you have. And if you are running several different clouds, how do you uniformly, from a single pane of glass, manage all these different pieces of the operations? Because if your team can't do that, then it's going to be a pretty rough time, and you're not really going to be seeing a lot of that benefit that a distributed cloud will bring. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is what our customers sort of demand from us, right? So they really demand, these couple of things that you see on my slides here, right? They really are looking for that public cloud experience, which means software catalog, ability to kind of install things at a click of a button, nice user interface. They expect this type of experience even on their on-premise sites. Now, everyone who's ever been in IT operations on the call, on the webinar, will probably know that this is a lot harder to achieve than than a marketing slide like this would lead you to think, right? The ability to deal with and make a single management sort of like dashboard is nearly impossible with a mix of different systems. Ability to maintain governance across multiple different systems sitting on multiple different clouds is nearly impossible. The reason is AWS has a compliance and security platform the way it implements it. Microsoft has its own version. AWS has its own version. So then how do you actually keep that simple across many different clouds, right? And this is exactly like where IBM is looking to deliver some value, right? We, as you know, I think Patrick mentioned that before, like they partner with Red Hat. Red Hat is now owned by IBM. And I believe Red Hat now has the most comprehensive container management platform for enterprises, as well as smaller SME companies on the market. The reason is it's probably got the best user interface. I'll show you in a demo a little bit later. Probably got the best interface, probably the broadest ecosystem. And with our product, IBM Cloud Satellite, you are now able to then bring the power of OpenShift to just about any cloud provider. It could be Alibaba, it could be AWS, it could be Azure, and on-premise. Okay, so it really delivers on the promise of a public cloud consumption anywhere. It's really a single management and operations experience. I'm not sure how many of you attended the session from yesterday, but we demonstrated the ability to also take a compliance framework that you implement in IBM Cloud to extend that compliance controls to distributed environments across multiple clouds. And that's really the key when it comes to financial institutions, for example, which, obviously we've got a lot of clients in that space. Okay, so then of course, needless to say, if it's a container style application, it's very flexible, which means you can take a container, you can scale that, function out linearly, horizontally, without having to scale your, physical like virtual machines and infrastructure. So this utilizes your infrastructure a lot more efficiently, drives costs down, and helps, like applications scale where it's needed, not really having to just like chunk up multiple virtual machines. Now, obviously, there's a paradigm shift in the way applications are developed. And of course, in line with the way the container market is growing, we believe that most applications will be delivered in a microservices format. Just ask your application provider or your developer teams. Okay, so again, just to reiterate, we want security, we want data governance, which means data must reside maybe in country. You can achieve this in several different ways. You can work with local data center providers, but IBM, obviously we have data centers around the world, but we can't and are not present in every single geography. If you're like a company from Myanmar and you said, oh, we need to have data governance in Myanmar, we don't have a data center there. So how does IBM actually work with companies in Myanmar with data governance? It's exactly through this product that we can work with Alibaba, who has a data center in the Philippines. We can work with AWS, we can work with Azure, but we put the satellite configurations into that data center, and then we manage the compliance and regulations in that distributed fashion. Okay, then of course, finally, talent is key. But instead of having teams that are specialists in AWS, specialists in Azure, specialists in Alibaba, you are now able to train a team that is a specialist for OpenShift, and you can deploy your infrastructure anywhere, right? IBM Cloud will then manage that OpenShift deployments across multiple distributed locations. All right. So again, this is the definition that Gartner has. A distributed cloud refers to the distribution of public cloud services. So we not only will bring an OpenShift deployment on your premise or on your other cloud, we also will bring IBM Cloud services like databases as a service, like CDNs, like everything that's on the catalog over to on-premise. And this is the promise of what a distributed cloud will be. Okay. Finally, this is important. I don't know why this is kind of like, let me just like, okay, cool. All right. The key thing about IBM Cloud Satellite is that instead of you having to stand up an infrastructure, deploy a Kubernetes cluster and maintain that on different clouds, we offer a pay-as-you-go model, which means you can stand it up. It's built hourly, and if you can stand up a development cluster, the things are deployed automatically. And once you guys don't need it anymore, you can like decommission it, and then you won't be charged anymore. Our security and compliance center, as you can see over here, right? This tooling is free. We actually bring on board NIST frameworks, financial services frameworks, and I would encourage you to sort of like set up a meeting so I can actually show you what it is. But this is exactly what banks are looking for. It will tell you the systems that are out of compliance so that you can do remediation. It's self-service. You can also put in your own custom rules, custom regulation, and compliance guidelines based on where and what your organization is required to be compliant to. Okay, so then of course it's security. It's a given. Everyone has security, but the key thing is this is able to be managed, from a single location, using IBM Security and Compliance Center. So what exactly does Satellite really bring to the table? Again, by implementing your cluster on your data center in your jurisdiction, you guys are then able to keep private data private. When we say we manage the cluster in terms of health, system deployment, updates, etc. But the key thing is we never look at the data. We don't even have access to the data. We only have access to what's known as telemetry. Telemetry is logging. It is not logging data, but logging, traffic, logging health checks. And we are very transparent about what we actually log and what we actually manage. Okay, so we check if things are in compliance. We check if, your cluster is healthy. We check if it needs an update. We deploy, licenses like OpenShift licensing to the edge location, that type of thing. Okay, so from a single console, you can technically manage hundreds of sites using a single compliance policy that can be within Frankfurt. Your site can be in Frankfurt, it can be in Philippines, it can be in Singapore, doesn't matter. Okay, so as long as you have an IBM Cloud account, you're deploying satellite across many different locations, we'll be able to do that. And again, we're more than happy to conduct free POCs as well as demos so that we put our money where our mouth is. Okay, so again, a distributed cloud will allow you to extend cloud services wherever you need them. It's a big promise, but this is absolutely true. And I will actually show you in a bit, because I will close off this thing with a demo. Okay, so again, we've also got, a lot of like industry, how should we say, praise, I guess, from like Gartner, as well as the other independent research organizations. All right. IBM, I believe, is turning the corner with regards to the way we're approaching cloud. One way of approaching cloud is let's put up more and more data centers, et cetera, and let's just like deliver, VMs and we host like virtual machines. Again, this is not really aligned to the way the industry is growing. So we've aligned ourselves pretty much with containers. We still have virtual machines. We still have x86, VMs. We still have the regular services, but we're really taking that to the next level, because a lot of customers, even though they say they want to move services and applications to the public cloud, at the end of the day, one of the main reasons why applications are not really moving from, financial institutions to the public cloud is because of compliance. So what do? We bring the compliance to the customer. We standardize that. And instead of the customer holding a team to manage compliance for every single project, every single application, we say, comply with the framework because it's validated across, at a global level with NIST, as well as enhanced through local market regulations. That's the kind of stuff that, IBM will bring to the table. All right. So again, you can see here that we've got, you can run existing infrastructure of satellite on existing infrastructure. You can run it pretty much, technically you can put up a small machine at home and you can actually just run a satellite cluster from your home if you like. But of course, we support all the other different clouds. And if you look on our documentations page, you will actually see specific instructions on how to set up, your OpenShift satellite cluster on the different clouds. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the observability section of this. All right, we've recently purchased Instana. With any significantly large container in a container environment, if you will, you need some way to monitor at a fairly granular level which application is using up the most resources. How do you scale that application? If an application fails, do you restart it? What are your health policies on that for that particular service? Okay, so Instana is one of those really incredible tools, which I looked at it and it was far beyond what I even imagined it to be, which is, again, I guess why IBM acquired it. So Instana will give you several different things, but it'll give you auto discovery, horizontal and vertical, contextual mapping. So for example, you've got an application that goes web application, middleware, database. That's vertical. But you have an application that sort of talks horizontally because you have this particular microservice that is shared across many different applications, right? Instana will help you auto discover what the relationships are within these, within your container ecosystem. Okay, then of course it gives you things like how your DevOps pipeline is performing. For example, it will integrate with the DevOps insights that we have already on our DevOps pipeline. It will integrate into compliance checking, and it will figure out if there's anything that has a gap. Of course, it's going to be a root cause analysis. there is no way we have enough time to run through all the different components that Instana has to offer. But again, if you guys will need something like that, this is something that we will be more than happy to demonstrate. Okay, then of course, analytics the way you want it. If you have the kind of analytics that your management will require, that your auditors will require, this makes life like extremely simple for operational teams. Now, one of my favorite things about this is because let's say you're running OpenShift on a satellite cluster, in many different locations, where can you get Instana? Okay, so Instana is available on Operator Hub and the Red Hat Marketplace. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, I'm just going to go here to my satellite cluster, which I have over here. Okay, so this is, as you can see here, this is a desktop that's in the IBM cloud. It's actually in this is my IBM. Let me just make it a little larger for you. Okay, this is my IBM cloud account. I'm actually in a Bastion host at the moment. You can see here, I have a satellite cluster. If I went to my satellite cluster right here, this is my cluster, and I opened up my web console, I'll click on this, I'll be able to get into my satellite cluster. However, here's something that's interesting. Let me show you. Ooh, this is not it. Let me just shrink this down. Where's my thing? Okay. Let me just, give me a moment. Okay, I'm gonna exit my presentation. Okay, so if I were to go into my regular, okay, so this is my regular machine. If I went into my own account, this is at my home internet, public, my regular, it's not a Bastion host. If I clicked into this and I try to open up the web console, I am not able to. Very simple reason. Like, this is behind a firewall. This is on a customer site, actually, right? Well, it's a demo site, but you're not able to access it. The reason is it is behind a firewall. It's a private IP. Nothing externally can be accessed. However, I can still read telemetry. I can see that all my nodes are healthy, and all my nodes are functioning as expected. Your OpenShift version numbers and that sort of thing. Okay, my worker pools, etc. This allows us to just do logging, to do monitoring, to do compliance checking, but unable to see any application data unless you're within the private network that it's deployed on. Okay, so let me just shrink that right here. So I have here, this is my RDP machine. As you can see here, because it's got Windows Explorer, which no one ever uses. So I can actually go into what's known as Operator Hub over here, and I can immediately then, kind of browse. So I don't have any operator items found because I haven't installed anything, obviously, but I can actually use Operator Hub as a means to deploy, Instana. So not only can you deploy things like Instana immediately into your OpenShift platform, which means you don't have to go to Instana and purchase the license and that type of thing. You can sort of purchase it on demand within an OpenShift environment, that's deployed in a satellite mode in a distributed cloud architecture. Okay, so what is available in the Red Hat Marketplace? Let me show you. Okay, you have everything from AI machine learning, databases as a service, things like networking, storage, virtualization, monitoring, logging, data sets. It is basically your own private cloud for containers that resides in your own environment. Okay, so because this is available, you don't have to go into a cloud location and have to install OpenShift by yourselves. The satellite config actually will do that for you. Okay, so you won't believe how easy it is to do. All you got to do is have a specific, some specific host. You don't even need a public IP. We run a script on that host. We connect outbound from an on-premise location to our cloud, and then we can establish the satellite link. and then we can provision directly into that environment. Okay, so I've heard the bell. I will stop here and I will answer any questions that you have. Okay, so thank you very much for that reminder. I know I could go on all day actually with this stuff. So anyway, any questions that we have?
Yeah, we have one question from Andrew August.
Hey, Andrew.
What's the difference between monitoring and observability, and what is the best approach? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great, perfect. That's a really great question. Okay, so monitoring and observability is really it really depends on your own definition, right? Because some people will say, oh, it's really just application monitoring, but monitoring the way I see it is really just at a higher level, right? So I monitor the performance of my CPU. I monitor the, how much, RAM I'm using. But do you have that ability to observe what a particular microservice is doing, right? And this really relates to how your application is being deployed. For example, if you're in a monolith style application, you deploy it in a actual physical server, and your whole application, database, application plus, web service, they reside on that single machine, and it's not decoupled into many different services. Yeah, monitoring is fine. You just say, okay, then I just need a new machine, like once my CPU has been consumed, let's say. However, if you have a microservice style architecture, you really want to know, is my database running out of space? Is my database running out of performance? And your database is not in a machine; it's in a container within, a shared container infrastructure. So you really want to add more resources to that database component only, which then again will give you a bit more flexibility in terms of optimizing resources. I hope that answers the question. Do you have any other questions at the moment? Okay, and what is the best observability platform? Obviously, I think Instana is the best. You have to try it out for yourself. Everyone has slightly different preferences, but Instana is one of the most integratable platforms that I've seen so far. And it has some nice UI and some nice charts. And we really would like you guys to have a look at it. Okay, so thank you very much. I think that was all the questions that we had.